Welcome to Friday. I hope you're having a great week, and welcome to the conclusion of our compliance webinar series. We'll wrap things up today and review everything that we've gone over. It's the usual format, and at the end of this, I'll give you a link where you can go back and review any of these webinars at any time. So I know that this may seem in some ways like much ado about nothing. And frankly, that's what we hope for you is nothing. We hope that you never have compliance issues, that you never have anything to do with identity theft, either discovering it or having it happen to someone. We hope you're not ever caught up with a terrorist affiliate. We hope that you're storing things properly. So if all those things are happening, then the result will be nothing. You know, again, the short version of all of compliance is you have to detect the potential for and take the steps to prevent identity theft. You don't want to be involved with selling to terrorists or their affiliates, and you don't want to become involved with any kind of money laundering or potential money laundering activities. So there are 5 legal components: the red flags, disposal, OFAC, safeguard, and the USA Patriot Act. Red flags is all about identity theft. It's about using stolen credit card numbers, stolen driver's license numbers, stolen social security numbers. Identity theft is a terrible problem in the United States. And the real bad part of identity theft is that most people don't know what's happened until they have an unpaid bill or there's money missing from an account or deducted from a charge card. The red flags rule was passed to find and identify and prevent identity theft. Now, with the red flags, as with all of the compliance policies and procedures, you have to have capability to identify it, detect it, respond to it, administer it, and evaluate it. Your compliance officer will be able to help with all of these issues as well. Disposal policies have to do with disposing of non-public, personally identifiable information. Now, if it's so important to be cautious, the question comes up, why collect it in the first place? Well, the fact is you have to run your business. You couldn't do credit without getting this non-public information. There's just a lot of reasons. Plus, obtaining a photo ID, driver's license, and social security number is required under the red flags rule. So you need those, you need to copy them, but then those copies need to be protected and disposed of properly. Now, credit reports will show if a person has passed the red flags requirements, and if they meet the requirements for doing business with you. Those must be properly disposed of as well. So proper disposal means paper has to be cross-shredded. Never throw away paper records without shredding them, and it's got to be a cross shredder. Computer records, the drive or the memory chip on which any non-public information is stored has to be scrubbed with specialized software, or it has to be destroyed. It's not okay simply to go in and hit delete. Delete will erase a fundamental link to the information, but that information will still be available for someone who's determined to get it. Now, there is a required maintenance period. So credit reports have to be maintained for 7 years. And copies of the Social Security card and driver's license have to be maintained for 2 years. During that period of time, they have to be stored properly and securely. OFAC is the Office of Foreign Asset Control. It is against the law to make a loan to or accept money from anyone on the OFAC list. These are terrorists and terrorist affiliate organizations. A failure to check the OFAC list and a failure that in some way involves you with either taking money from or facilitating a loan to can result in jail time. It can result in fines of up to $1 million. You just simply don't want to do it. And you shouldn't assume that just because somebody looks okay, they are. And also, I know that this says to make a loan. You are all involved in making indirect loans. They're underwritten by banks, for sure, but you are responsible for making sure that those loans are going to individuals that are okay. It's easy. There's an online website. You just put in the name. If it gets a hit, put in more information. Most of the time, you won't find an OFAC hit. I know at Dealer Profit Services, we've done literally hundreds of thousands of searches, and we have never had an OFAC hit. Knock on wood, that doesn't mean it can't happen, but we are diligent about doing it all the time. So double check everything. Go to the OFAC link, put in all the information. If there's still an issue, contact your compliance officer. If there remains an issue, there's an OFAC hotline, and that number is listed here, 800-540-6322. We don't want to cost you business, but going to jail or paying $1 million in fines will cost you business. So be safe. The safeguard rule. Anybody, any business that collects a customer's non-public information has to ensure that that information is safely stored. You have to have the proper protection and the safeguards in place, and you have to have ways to make sure that your employees and others can't steal the identity information that you may have in your possession. That goes to leaving deal jackets with credit reports out on a desk or shoved in a drawer that's not locked. Any way that could compromise this non-public information must be protected against. You have to have a written plan. You have to have one or more employees to administer the plan, starting with your compliance officer. You have to identify where there are potential problem areas. You have to have a plan to prevent problems and to monitor and test the plan. Your employees have to be trained. Make sure that any providers you've got, any credit agencies, are following the same appropriate safeguards. And you have to do regular audits and revise your safeguard plan as necessary to remain compliant. And then there's the USA Patriot Act. This was a law that was passed after the activities on September 11th, 2001. And it's a law and a set of regulations that require lenders, or in your case, indirect lenders, to make sure that they're not assisting terrorists or terrorist organizations in any way by lending to them or laundering money for them. An anti-money laundering program has to be established in your business so that you can be sure that you're not assisting terrorists in any way. Cash payments in excess of $10,000 have to be reported on the IRS FinCEN form 8300. Now, cumulative cash payments over a 12-month period that exceed $10,000 have to be reported as well. So it doesn't have to be a single cash payment. It's got to be cash payments for a related transaction over a 12-month period that exceed $10,000. So cashier's checks under $10,000 are cash. Money orders are cash. Traveler's checks are cash. Cash is cash. Gold and silver is cash. Frankly, anything that's not credit is cash. And what you have to watch for is that drip, drip, drip. The 2 or 3 or 4 related transactions, none of which are over $10,000, but which add up to an amount that is over $10,000. So some of you have had the opportunity to see this. I want to have you see this interview with Rob Miller one more time. I did this interview. I've watched this multiple times now, and I learn something new every time. So here we go, talking to Rob Miller.
Well, I'm really excited today. We've got a real special guest. We've got Rob Miller. Rob Miller is the co-founder, co-owner of Cyclone Agency, which handles F&I ancillary products, financial ancillary products, and training for automotive, power sport, marine, RV dealers. And they've been doing this for a long time. And Rob and his partner have been in the industry for even a lot longer than that. I won't keep doing that part of the introduction because it'll make him seem old. But Rob's got the experience that counts. So, Rob, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to spend and give us some of your expertise on compliance today.
Happy to be with you today, Earl.
Well, great. I really appreciate it. So let's just start with this. It feels to me, and I see this often, is that the whole issue of compliance right now is one that if you ask a dealer about it, they'll say, oh, yeah, that's important. But the second they've got those words out of their mouth, there's kind of an eye roll, and it's like, I want to do anything but talk about compliance. So I guess my question for you is, why do you think that behavior exists? And I know you do compliance training and you work with your dealers on compliance. How do you encourage the importance of compliance and get that behavior changed a little bit so that they're really kind of focusing on compliance?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most burning and difficult question that dealers face. Is most dealers that I know, they got in the business really for one reason, and that's to sell their product, to treat their customer right, to get them to come back, to earn a nice living for themselves and their families. So I think that's the first thing that a dealer thinks about. And they also think with this compliance thing that if I treat people right and I do things the right way, what I believe is the correct way and what customers want, then I'll never have a problem. And even if I have a problem, I'll step into it and I'll make it right with the customer. Well, that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is in this world exists things like a class action attorney. And class action attorneys might find someone doing something incorrectly, violating compliance laws, and suddenly believe that everyone is doing it. And so that if you get involved in a class action lawsuit, not only will it cost you a bunch of your time, but it could cost you a bunch of your money, just proving that you didn't even do anything wrong. Can you imagine where that would go if they found out that you were indeed doing something immoral? So I think that's part of it, that the fear is really there because we think to ourselves, hey, I do things the right way. I'm a small dealer. Nobody really is targeting me. And I to some degree would agree with that if you do things the right way, you probably are going to be okay. But it's worried about that class action attorney number one. And then I think it's very easy then for a dealer when the information is really pretty convoluted out there. When we first started researching compliance, we found out that there were 29 governmental agencies that control the motor vehicle industry. And oftentimes federal law contradicts state law, and to the point where you almost feel like you have to be an attorney to figure it all out. So I think what happens is it gets kind of pushed aside. And pushed aside to the fact that we want to do things right and we believe we're doing things right, but we're probably not fully compliant in a lot of areas that we need to be. So I hope that kind of answers your question with that. It's not an out of sight, out of mind. It's just I'd rather push it aside and just try to make sure that I do things the right way for my people. And that, of course, is step one.
Well, but do you have any magic words that it can give to dealers to get them to take the steps to actually be compliant?
Yeah, a couple of things. One of them would be that just what I said about worrying, not worrying about what other dealers or what you do, but what other dealers are doing. And then number two, it's the avoidance of litigation in some cases where that can drag on for several weeks, several months sometimes. It's just a lot easier to be compliant than it is to not be compliant in the end. And I think that's where dealers have to realize that it's a simpler thing to get compliant. There's literally a checklist that you can go down through. And for the most part, when we do compliance audits, we'll find that dealers are about 60 to 75% compliant. And that comes back to the fact that you can't be just a little bit compliant. You need to be all the way compliant. And I think once dealers kind of realize that it's easier than they think it is to be compliant. And the best part of it is it doesn't cost anything to do that. It could cost you a ton, though, not to be compliant. So I think that would be my message.
That's good. That's good. I'm going to use that too. That's
Feel free.
So, in your experience, are you seeing compliance is actually a very broad subject? I mean, there's lots of different areas. Do you see 2 or 3 sort of primary areas for compliance breakdowns with the folks that you work with and talk to? And if you do, what are they, and how do you help your dealers get compliant?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the Privacy Act, we do a very, very good job as an industry of making sure that people realize that the transaction you're completing with me is private. You give people that initial privacy notice. The problem is, here's one of those areas where you can't be just kind of compliant. We ask immediately, the follow-up question is, are you giving the required annual notices? And then it's deer in the headlights. What would be an annual notice? Well, it is a requirement that as long as you have a business relationship with the consumer, which means that they're making payments on their loan for 60 months, they are frequenting your service department, your salespeople are calling them back, meaning that you have a relationship with that customer. You have to continue to send them annually these compliance or these privacy notices. And we all get them. I mean, if you have a credit card, an insurance policy, a loan, a mortgage, you're getting them, and they're basically junk mail. But that's a requirement. It used to be very expensive to send those out via regular mail, and a lot of folks have gone to the electronic method where we just email it to the customer. So that would be one area. The second one that goes along with that is safeguard rules. We sometimes don't do a very good job of buttoning down private information in our own showrooms. I can do a compliance audit with safeguard rules, walk through a showroom and find credit apps laying right side up with customer signature and names on several tables. I can find that we're not keeping files secure like we need to. I can find that we're not taking computer screens back to the password level. We're just leaving them up during the day. So just having someone designated as that compliance officer that just walks through the showroom once in a while and checks those things out and educates salespeople and managers about what they can and can't do, that goes a long way to being compliant. So I see those two a lot, and I also see the OFAC thing that is out there. And I hope everyone knows what OFAC is and what it really means. OFAC is the Office of Foreign Asset Controls, part of the U.S. Treasury. They control the flow of money in and out of this country. That list got started in the 80s under the Reagan administration when he declared war on the Colombian drug cartel. And so a lot of the names that you see on that list are Hispanic. And it expanded after 2001 when we had 9/11. President Bush at the time added terrorists and money launderers to that list. The last time I looked at it, that list was 415,000 names, individuals and businesses and organizations known to support terrorism and money laundering. Where our compliance comes in is that we are required to collect photo ID from the customer and then take that ID and run it against the OFAC list on every retail transaction, whether it's a cash buyer, a finance buyer, or a lease. And for the most part, our retail customers that are financing or leasing are kind of checked out by our lender, but we still need to be able to prove that we did it. The ones that we miss are those cash customers. And they're the ones that are most likely to be involved in money laundering or something like that. And so we put together a checklist of things that we look for each time. The government didn't do us a favor with OFAC and the $10,000 cash reporting rule back in 2017. They added language that said suspicious transactions of any nature need to be reported of any dollar amount. And so it may help to designate what actually cash is for your listeners. Cash is coin and currency. It's cashier's checks written for under $10,000. Cashier's checks over $10,000 are automatically reported. It does not include personal checks, but it does include those cashier's checks that are under 10 grand, because money can be received in combination, can it? I could take $3,000 in cash and a $7,500 cashier's check. That's $10,000 in cash in a single transaction. So OFAC is another one that we see not being followed very well. And honestly, it's the one that carries the heaviest criminal and civil penalties. And we have to keep the information for a period of 7 years after we check OFAC. And it's a simple process. It's just check and make sure this individual's not on the list. One of the things that happens to a lot of our dealers is they get partial hits. Partial hits would mean that I called in a name, and let's just say it's a common name like Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor will get a hit on OFAC. Charles Taylor was the former president of Liberia. He's a smuggler and a human trafficker, and so a bad guy, and he's on the list. You may get a Charles Taylor in your dealership. It's very simple to take that. There's an 800 number, and there's also a website that you can get cleared on OFAC. So being compliant on OFAC is really simple. It's just committing to it and doing it with every single customer.
Yeah, I agree. I think the OFAC thing is really important. We share the OFAC website, which is so simple, but just put the name in, and then you put more of the address in. And typically, even when you get those hits, once you just add a little more information, all of a sudden the hit starts to disappear.
Yep.
And then, take a screenshot of that, stick it in your deal jacket, and you're good.
Yep.
I do think you're absolutely right, and you already touched on this, but there's definitely confusion between the FinCEN 8300 $10,000 cash rule and what that means for OFAC. I can't tell you the number of conversations I've had where somebody said, well, it's less than $10,000, so I don't need to worry about OFAC. And I'm saying, no, it's just not right.
Yep. Totally separate rulings, but they kind of they definitely work in conjunction with one another. OFAC is just about proving someone isn't already on a list. That list is the specially designated nationals list. They call it the SDN list, blocked persons list. We can't transact business with them. Right? So if we did and we hadn't checked OFAC, we would have potentially some explaining to do. That might be more than just explaining. So that's one part of it. The FinCEN part, the 8300 form, goes hand in hand with that because that's who they're trying to catch. Someone that would be trying to attempt to launder money or commit a terrorist act or something like that. That particular ruling, because they now track transactions that are suspicious in nature, I always like to give definitions. I'll give you two. Someone comes into my dealership and says, show me the nicest boat you have and trailer for $99.95 delivered in cash. I'm hoisting my suspicious flag at that point. the person knows about the $10,000 cash reporting rule. And again, remember with that, there's no harm in reporting someone. If their money came and it was derived from legal means, they'll never hear from anyone. If it was derived from illegal means, they're probably going to have a knock on their door. If someone came into my dealership with wadded up $5, $10, and $20 bills in a plastic baggie, hoist the flag again. I'm suspicious about how that money was derived. So you never hurt yourself by being compliant with that. It's just a matter of, again, being committed to turning that in. So yeah, they go hand in hand. And I would say if we're looking at all of the different components of compliance, the final piece would be that I see a lot of is the red flag. And again, it's part of just making sure that the individual is who you're talking to. And my own personal favorite with that is to use Social Security number prefixes. And as we're conversing with the consumer and we're either taking a credit application or we're into that mode, if I say, you know, you're a 059 prefix, and I say, gosh, Merrill, I noticed you grew up in New Hampshire. If you say, wow, Rob, how'd you know I grew up in New Hampshire? Well, your Social Security number told me. What would be the odds that that wouldn't be that individual? It would be astronomical. But if the person looks at you and says, what are you talking about? I'm not from New Hampshire. We may have a case of identity theft. And as we all know, identity theft is America's largest crime at this point. It's run rampant. And part of our responsibility as motor vehicle dealers is to make sure that we know who we're selling our product to. So that's one that we definitely need to be diligent with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's another area that's become more of an unknown but interesting compliance issue, and that is, especially now with the pandemic, this idea of remote deliveries. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what I think a lot of dealers clearly don't understand, which is what challenges are that remote delivery presents.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an area where there's just confusion. And I think the confusion is caused by the fact that there's so many online retailers out there right now that we're competing against. And what ends up happening is we will deliver a vehicle and do the paperwork off premise in the consumer's place of business or their home or their wherever they're at. And that then draws up something known as the right of rescission. And it's 3 business days. The customer has the right to bring the vehicle back for any reason. It goes back to old antiquated laws. They used to call it the vacuum cleaner salesman law, where if someone came to your house and solicited you, you had the right to back out of that transaction up to 3 business days. It's okay that we're doing it as long as we give notice to the consumer that they have 3 days to bring the product back. If we fail to do that, then we've actually given them the right of rescission for as long as they own the product. And so having a written notice that we give them is a very important factor in that. But you bring up something else that's interesting as well. Most of our dealers that we do business with, marine dealers included, are licensed by the state and where they're at to do business primarily in their building, their place of business. They can't transact business anywhere else according to most state laws. And so we run into that with it as well, that we may be in violation of our dealer license. The problem is, again, it's the way consumers want to do transactions. And so we're almost victim to that if we won't do it, a customer will go somewhere and find someone who will. So the best way to help us with that is to do all of our transactions in a closed loop. A closed loop would be via UPS or FedEx, where that signature has to be made to collect the package. We know that it went to that person, they signed it and sent it back. To do the paperwork online, electronically, if that's possible, or to have them sign the paperwork in your licensed premise of business and then deliver them the car, that's perfectly fine. Or deliver them the boat, that's perfectly fine. It's just when we sign the paperwork off premise that we evoke that right of rescission. So great question, Merle.
So that's good. I don't think that's something that dealers, certainly not dealers I work with, are largely aware of. I don't. And honestly, I think you've helped educate me on this in the course of this. So that's something I will pay a lot more attention to.
It goes back, listen, it goes back to the same thing that we always talk about. 99% of the world, at least I still believe this, are good people. And so even if there's a problem with the consumer, if we do our best as a dealer to resolve that problem so that the customer feels like you've worked with them, normally that goes away. But we still have that 1% out there that's looking for you to do something wrong. And many folks are now aware of the right of rescission. And it's just a simple signature on a form that says, hey, I have 3 days to bring it back. And we're dealing with all of these different online retailers that don't seem to really think the rules apply to them. So I understand why a dealer feels kind of crippled with that one, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so, and I think you've touched on what I'm about to ask to some extent, but this is just kind of an open-ended question. If you were able to offer your best advice to dealers as to how and why to implement compliance best practices, what would it be and why?
Yeah. Well, in a nutshell, it doesn't cost a lot of money and time to be compliant, but it could cost you a ton not to be. And I think that's the best reason. An ounce of prevention is, worth a pound of cure every single time. And we want to make sure that our dealers are doing what they do best, which is sell and deliver boats to the public. And when they do that, then they're happy and everybody's happy. There's no reason to put yourself in a position where something could go wrong legally when we all know what it is that we need to do. And getting compliant is not difficult at all. And what I would strongly suggest to the viewers of this particular webinar is that do designate a compliance officer in their dealership. And I have to kind of chuckle about this one because this is a tag you're it situation. And normally we see a finance and insurance person or a person who's doing that paperwork or a office manager, someone who's processing paperwork. They're generally the best suited to do that. And I think if we designate a single person that's in charge of it, and then we grant them or empower them with doing things the right way and constantly educating the rest of our staff, that we can always demonstrate intent, Merle. And intent goes a long way in the law, right? We intended to do things the right way. There was no intent here to defraud or to not follow the law. And whenever we can prove that in our dealership, then that goes a mile. So that's our best practice.
Yeah, no, actually, it's interesting. One of the things that I do talk about is that the phrase "close only counts" in horseshoes, hand grenades, and compliance. If you are making the best effort and you are trying to do the right things and you demonstrate that, then mistakes may still happen, but it's not going to be as hard on you as if you're not trying. So
I 100% agree, and we see that. I've been on long enough to see some dealers be audited on several of the things we're talking about, and intent was always a word that was used. Is that we had intent to do it the right way, and it does go a long ways, especially with regulators.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Rob, I, again, really appreciate this. I think you've shared some incredibly valuable information, and I truly appreciate your time.
Right. I appreciate you asking me to come on and talk to your folks. It's always fun to do that. I hope sometime we can do it again, Merle, when the subject isn't quite so, how do I say that, boring? I don't know.
following out. Compliance.
Yeah, it's not a boring subject. It's something that we need to do. But I will say this, for your folks especially, there's a lot of resources out there. I mean, you're certainly one of the better ones for them to get this information. And I think just getting that checklist out to people and letting them just go down through it and see where you're at right now. That's the best way to start. Just see where you're at right now, and you'll find out that you probably don't have far to go. And I think that's what most dealers discover when we start talking to them about it. They go, well, yeah, we do all those things now. Okay, well, we just got a couple of quick things to button up, and we're smooth sailing at that point.
Yep. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, again, I appreciate your time and your wisdom. So thanks very much, and it's been great.
Thanks, Merrill.
Thank you.
So that was Rob Miller. Again, I learned something every time I listen to him, and he's a great resource. So we don't really have questions today. I think we've covered most everything. So compliance really is a top-down organizational attitude. And as Rob said, it's not hard. It's just doing the right things and making all of the compliance attributes habits. But it's not just a thing, it's the thing. Because when you're not compliant and it catches up with you, you're not going to like those results. So identify and prevent identity theft. Don't enable terrorists. Launder lots of things, but not money. Avoid fines. Stay out of jail. Just do compliance right, and it's going to make your life much, much happier. And that's it. Our compliance series is complete. You can get more information just by dropping me a note, or you can go to webinars at fisvcs.com, and there's a list of all of our webinars, others outside the compliance series they have links, so they're all available for you. Really appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and if there's anything we can do to help you, please let us know. Thank you, and have a great rest of the year, and enjoy your holidays.